and welcome back to Sip&Talk. So glad you could join us.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all you Sip&Talkers out there, wherever you might be tuning in from.
It is great to be back.
You know, I have to share something that happened this week. It was kind of funny.
Oh, yeah. Do tell.
So, we sometimes put Chinese subtitles on our clips.
Uh-huh.
Well, we got this really nice message from a listener in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And they pointed out that we have a lot of typos. A lot.
Oh, no. Ethan, get in here. I'm totally kidding. Wow.
But get this. The best part is they actually offered to correct them all for us for free.
Wait, really? That's incredible. People can be so friendly.
It's so nice. But it's also like a real dilemma,
What do you mean?
Well, on one hand, it's an amazing offer. But on the other, we really don't want people doing work for us for free.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, we don't really have the budget for a proofreader right now.
I see. Yeah, that's a tough spot.
It is. So I think for now, we just have to let them be wrong. I mean, the subtitles are probably, 90% accurate?
90% is pretty good.
It's good enough.
Speaking of 90%, that actually tees up today's topic perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's heard of the 80-20 rule, but have you ever heard of the 90-10 rule? It's kind of like the 80-20 rule on steroids.
It is. And, after digging into all of this for today, I had this wild idea, a kind of life hack hypothesis.
Ooh, I'm listening. Lay it on me.
Okay, so what if I just admit right now that my own decision-making is only about 60% accurate? I'm, a little better than a coin flip, but I am far from perfect.
Okay, I think most of us could probably admit that.
So the question is, how do I win? And here's the hypothesis. What if I find 4 other people who are also about 60% accurate, and we team up? We could form this, super genius squad.
A super genius squad made of slightly better than average people? Hold on, that doesn't sound right.
I know, it's counterintuitive, but you just stumbled onto the whole point. You're describing a statistical effect called collective intelligence.
Don't spoil it. We're going to get there. But okay, that's a fantastic way to frame this whole conversation because it gets at this unifying idea we're going to explore today. Success in life, in investing, in your career. It isn't about one massive, grand slam, perfect decision.
No, not at all.
It's about a whole series of mostly correct steps taken quickly and consistently.
Exactly. And we can actually link all these different theories together. You've got the 80-20 rule, this idea of ready, fire, aim, the 90% rule of consistency, speed over perfection.
They're all pieces of the same puzzle.
They are. And the message behind all of them is that you win by accumulating lots of small 60% victories. That's how you blow past the person who's always waiting for 90% certainty before they even make a move.
Okay, so for everyone listening, that's the core idea. The smartest people aren't the ones who get it right the first time. They're the ones who can correct and iterate and build advantages over and over again.
That's the intersection. So today, we're going to talk about how this explains success in life, how it can dramatically boost your investment returns.
And also why big companies, venture capitalists, and even AI models are all starting to rely on this exact same logic.
So let's get into it.
Our big talk today is on Pareto, iteration, and collective intelligence in life and investing.
So to start, we have to establish the basic framework, which is that the world is just. It's inherently imbalanced.
And that all starts with the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 rule.
That's the starting gun for all of this. It comes from an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, who noticed that, 20% of the inputs seem to cause 80% of the results.
And it is everywhere. 20% of your customers generate 80% of your revenue. 20% of the bugs in a piece of software cause 80% of the crashes.
Or, if you're like me, 20% of the effort you put in yields 80% of the actual results.
I feel that. It's really the law of minimal critical actions.
And its main use is that it tells you where to focus. It guides your time, your energy, your resources. But here's the thing. 80-20 is often way too tame. The real world is much, much more extreme.
Okay, so you're saying we're moving into the territory of power laws now, where that imbalance gets even crazier.
Exactly. We go beyond 80-20 to the 90-10 rule. Or sometimes it's even more skewed, like 991. The 90-10 rule says that just 10% of your choices or your actions will determine 90% of your outcomes.
And you see this in fields where there's a huge compounding effect.
Yes. Like venture capital. A VC firm might invest in 30 companies, and 27 of them will fail or break even. But the 3 that succeed, or maybe just one that becomes a massive outlier, that one company generates 90-95% of the fund's entire return.
It pays for all the other failures and then some.
Precisely. Or think about the 1% edge concept. This is where being just 1% better than average doesn't give you a 1% better result. It gives you a 10 times or 100 times advantage over the long run.
Can you walk us through an example of that? Because it's hard to wrap your head around how being just a tiny bit better leads to such a massive difference in outcome.
Think about something like a software platform, a global market. Let's say your product is just 1% easier to use than your competitors. Just a tiny bit.
Okay.
Well, users are going to naturally gravitate to the easier one. And because of network effects, everyone wants to be on the platform their friends are on. And the fact that it costs nothing to add one more user, your market share doesn't just go up by 1%.
It captures the whole market.
The whole thing. You get a winner-take-all outcome. The reward for that tiny 1% edge is absolutely monumental for you, and it's catastrophic for the loser. That's a power law distribution.
And this leads to, I think, the biggest psychological mistake that we all make. The difference between what's called the Gaussian world and the Paretian world.
Yes, this is so important. Our brains are basically wired to think in Gaussian terms.
Meaning normal distribution, a bell curve.
A bell curve. We assume things are linear, fair, symmetrical. If I work twice as hard, I expect to get twice the reward. If I'm a little bit better than average, I expect a little bit better than average outcome. It just feels right.
But the real world, especially when it comes to markets or technology or wealth, it's not like that at all. It's Paretian.
It is completely Paretian. It's what they call fat-tailed. It's asymmetrical and intensely winner takes all. The outcomes aren't driven by the average person, they're driven by the extremes.
The average stock return for a year doesn't really matter if 90% of all the gains happened on 10% of the trading days?
Or from just a handful of stocks. So if you go through life investing and planning as if the world is this nice, neat, predictable bell curve, you're going to be completely blindsided. You'll be looking for steady returns in a world that's defined by these huge, unpredictable spikes.
You have to be positioned for the extreme outcomes, not the average ones.
That's the biggest takeaway. Chasing the average is a losing game in a Paretian world. You have to find those 10% of inputs that have the potential for those crazy outsized returns.
Now let's turn this inward for a second, because this 90% rule also applies to our own psychology, right? Something to do with cognitive dissonance.
It does. This is the psychological version, sometimes called the 1090 law. The idea is that only about 10% of your life is determined by external events you can't control.
Like a traffic jam, a project getting canceled, a bad day in the market.
Right. Stuff that just happens. But the other 90% is determined entirely by your reaction to those events.
So the event itself is actually the small part. The 90% of the pain or the anger or the frustration, that's all self-inflicted.
It's your choice. The researcher Leon Festinger found that when an event challenges our beliefs, we change our attitude to reduce that internal conflict. So if you respond to that 10% setback with a problem-solving mindset, your whole internal state, that 90%, shifts to align with that positive action.
You're using the small negative event as a trigger for a huge positive psychological adjustment.
And that's how you build real emotional resilience. You consciously decide to focus 90% of your energy on the thing you can control your response instead of the 10% you can.
Which is a perfect segue. If our internal attitude is that critical 10%, how do we translate that into actual, external action?
Well, that brings us to our next big idea, this philosophy of ready, fire, aim.
RFA. I love this concept. It's the total opposite of the normal approach, right? Ready, aim, fire.
You completely inverse it. It's all about prioritizing execution over perfect, exhaustive planning.
And the enemy it's designed to defeat is analysis paralysis.
Exactly. We've all been there. It's that perfectionism trap where you just spend forever in the aim stage. You're trying to gather 100% of the information.
Model every possible outcome. Eliminate every single risk.
And the result is you either act way too late or you just never act at all. And a perfect plan that never gets executed is, it's completely worthless.
Especially today. People talk about living in a VUCA, world volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. In that kind of environment, the cost of delaying is just massive.
It's catastrophic. The opportunity cost is huge. If you spend 6 months perfecting a product and your competitor launches theirs in 2 months at, say, 70% complete.
They get the market first. They get the user feedback first. They get to start learning while you're still planning.
Exactly. RFA cuts that cost down by treating the action itself, the fire, as the most valuable form of intelligence gathering you have.
So it's not just about being fast for the sake of being fast. It's about learning through doing. The action is the research.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the most famous business application of this is the whole lean startup methodology, specifically the minimum viable product, or MVP.
The MVP, everyone talks about it, but I think a lot of people get it wrong. It doesn't mean just shipping a bad or sloppy product.
No, not at all. It's about strategic imperfection. You launch a product with the absolute minimum set of features needed to solve the core problem for a user. Maybe it's 50% complete, maybe 90.
And the goal is to get it into the hands of real users as fast as possible to get their feedback.
Yes, that real-world feedback you get from the fire is 1,000 times more valuable than any internal market research you could ever do. It creates this loop.
Ready, which is your basic prep.
Fire, which is the launch.
And then aim, where you adjust and calibrate based on what you learned, and then you just repeat the cycle.
Think about a company like Tesla. They don't hold back a new software feature until it's 100% flawless. They push the update out to the whole fleet. That's the fire.
Then they monitor all the real-time data from the cars to see what works and what doesn't. That's the aim.
And they're already working on the next version. That constant RFA cycle gives them an agility that a traditional car company spending years in R&D just can't compete with.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If you tell people, especially beginners, to just ready, fire, aim,
aren't you just encouraging them to be reckless?
That is the single most important question. And the answer is about the scale of the fire.
What do you mean?
For a beginner investor, for instance, a shoot-first strategy doesn't mean betting your life savings on a whim. It means using a small, controlled amount of capital as a tuition payment.
So you're not gambling. You're buying real-world experience.
You're making the trial and error process affordable. You trade a small, known amount of money for practical judgment that you could never get from a book. The key is that the cost of failure has to be predictable and quantifiable.
And in personal growth, it's about taking that first small step, right? Signing up for the class, sending the one email. Yes. Instead of trying to map out your entire 10-year plan before you even start, you take one step, get feedback from the world, and then you adjust your course.
This reminds me of that famous trap in software development, the 90-90 trap.
Oh, the 90-90 trap is the perfect example of what happens when you aim too much. The saying goes, the first 90% of a project takes 90% of the time.
And the last 10% takes the other 90% of the time.
Right. You get stuck in this infinite loop of polishing and perfecting tiny features that probably don't even matter that much to the user.
So RFA is the antidote to that. It says, ship the core 90% and let the market tell you if that last 10% is even worth building.
You're prioritizing. And RFA can't work in a vacuum. It needs a stable foundation to operate from, a base that can absorb all those small failures. And that foundation is the 90% rule of discipline.
So RFA gives you the agility, but without a solid, consistent base, it just turns into chaos.
Complete chaos.
Yeah.
The 90% rule isn't about being perfect. It's about achieving what you could call sustainable average stability.
I think that's a huge relief for a lot of people listening. We're all taught to aim for 100%, but you're saying 90% consistency is actually a better strategy.
It's way better because the chase for 100% is brittle. It's unsustainable. The moment you slip up, you feel like a failure and you quit.
The all or nothing mindset.
Exactly. But if your goal is 90% consistency with your habits, your diet, your work routine, then the occasional 10% indulgence, like a piece of cake or a skipped workout, it doesn't derail you.
That 10% buffer is like a psychological pressure release valve. It builds forgiveness into the system.
It does. And you can apply this tactically, too. There's a great rule from Robin Sharma called the 90901 rule.
Oh, I love this one. It's so simple and so powerful.
It is. The rule is, for the next 90 days, you spend the first 90 minutes of your workday focused only on your single most important, highest impact goal.
That's it.
That's it. It protects your best cognitive energy. It forces the Pareto principle onto your schedule. You guarantee that your best, freshest brain power goes to the one thing that will actually move the needle.
And bypasses decision fatigue. You don't have to waste energy in the morning deciding what to do. The decision is already made.
Right. Now let's scale this up to leadership. A CEO or a manager is just drowning in decisions all day. They can't possibly try to perfect every single one.
So they have to use this 90-10 filter.
They have to. Only about 10% of their decisions are truly critical and require that slow, deliberate, ready, aim, fire approach.
And what falls into that 10% bucket?
The big, irreversible stuff. A merger or acquisition. a fundamental change in the company's core technology, a huge capital investment, hiring a key executive. Mistakes there can be fatal to the company.
And the other 90% of decisions?
These should be handled with RFA, made quickly, delegated, and adjusted later. Minor product tweaks, internal process changes. The real skill of a great leader is a judgment to know which bucket a decision falls into.
So you're not wasting time perfecting trivial choices.
Exactly. And finally, let's bring this back to investing one more time, because this is where the 90% rule really shines. It suggests that your psychology is way more important than your analytical skill.
That's a huge mindset shift. Most people think they need a complex algorithm or some secret knowledge to win in the market.
But the book, Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas, argues that long-term success in trading is 90% psychology and discipline and only 10% analysis or prediction.
And why is the split so skewed?
Because the market is fundamentally random and uncertain. You simply cannot predict every move correctly. It's impossible. So success doesn't come from having a perfect plan. It comes from flawlessly executing an imperfect plan.
So it's about your discipline, your risk management, your emotional control, not panicking during a downturn.
That's the 90%. Can you stick to your system even when it's emotionally difficult? For most listeners, this is a huge validation for simple, systematic strategies.
Like dollar cost averaging into a low-cost ETF and just holding on.
Exactly. You're prioritizing your stable 90% execution psychology over trying to time the market with, these aggressive high accuracy attempts.
Okay, so now that we have the individual's discipline covered, let's get back to that paradox you started with. Why being 60% good with a group of people is better than being 90% good all by yourself.
Yes. This is where it gets really fun. We're talking about the mathematical proof behind that super genius squad idea. It's called the Condorcet jury theorem.
That sounds very formal, but the idea is actually super practical.
It's incredibly practical.
Yeah.
The core principle says that if every person in a group has a judgment that's just slightly better than random, so over 50% accurate, let's stick with our 60% number.
Okay.
And this is the crucial part. If all their judgments are independent from one another.
Meaning they aren't all reading the same newspaper or getting their ideas from the same influencer.
Exactly. If those two conditions are met, then the collective decision of the group, decided by a majority vote, gets closer and closer to 100% accuracy as you add more people.
So the independence is what cancels out the individual errors. My 40% chance of being wrong isn't correlated with your 40% chance of being wrong.
That's the magic.
Mm-hmm.
The errors are random, so they wash out. But the 60% signal, the part that's correct, that adds up and gets stronger.
But I'm still stuck on this. Why does the group of 60%ers beat me, the 90% genius?
Because you, the genius, still have a 10% chance of making a catastrophic mistake. And because the whole system relies on you, that one mistake can bring everything down. You are a single point of failure. The group spreads that risk out.
Let's run the numbers because they're so wild.
Okay. One person at 60% accuracy. The group is 60% accurate.
Makes sense.
Now add two more, so we have a group of 3, all at 60%. The probability that at least 2 of them are right a majority jumps to almost 65%. It's already better.
That's a small gain, but it's a gain.
But watch how it scales. At 15 people, the collective accuracy is almost 80%. By the time you get to 101 people, all of whom are just barely better than a coin flip, the group's decision is over 97% accurate.
That is just... It's profound. It's mathematical proof that the system and the structure are more powerful than individual, fragile brilliance.
And the takeaway is so actionable. It is smarter, cheaper, and way more reliable to build a system that relies on lots of 60% accurate contributors than it is to go on this desperate, expensive hunt for one 90% genius.
And this idea is the absolute bedrock of modern finance. It's the why behind diversification.
It's the core of modern portfolio theory. The idea isn't to find risk-free assets. It's to combine multiple assets whose returns are not correlated with each other.
So you don't need the one perfect stock. You need a portfolio of independent investment ideas.
And when one of them is having a bad day, it's in its 40% failure zone, another, independent one, is statistically likely to be doing fine in its 60% success zone. The overall portfolio stays stable.
Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, calls this the holy grail of investing.
He does. His whole strategy is built on finding 15 to 20 of these non-correlated return streams. Each one might only have a slight edge, maybe 60%. But when you combine them, the portfolio's volatility just plummets.
And this is also why quant trading firms work the way they do.
100%. They don't try to build one giant, perfect model. They build dozens of small, simple models. Each one is only slightly profitable, maybe 55% accurate. Then they ensemble them, they combine the signals. The errors from one model get canceled out by the successes of the others.
So the advice for everyone listening is pretty clear. Accept your own 60% accuracy. Then put your energy into systematic diversification and risk management, not into trying to find that one perfect high-risk bet.
And you can use this for big life decisions, too. When you have a major choice to make a career change, a big move, most people go to their one trusted friend, the person they think is a 90% genius.
And you're inheriting their 10% blind spot as a huge risk.
The better strategy is to create a personal board of directors. Go ask 5 or 10 different people from totally different backgrounds, make sure their thinking is independent. The consensus view that emerges from that group will be statistically far more reliable than any single expert's advice.
You're creating your own little Condorcet jury.
You are. And one last application is skills stacking, an idea from Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Right. The idea is, instead of trying to be world-class, like 100% at one really competitive skill.
Yes, so you become pretty good, 60 or 70%, at 2 or 3 different average skills. Adams combined his okay drawing skills, his pretty good sense of humor, and his average business knowledge.
And the combination created Dilbert, which was this incredibly unique and valuable thing, even though none of the individual skills were world-class on their own.
The synergy is the key. You're using collective wisdom on yourself, combining average skills to get a brilliant, non-linear result, and it all protects you from that catastrophic single point of failure.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. The world is asymmetrical. We need to act fast. We need to be disciplined, and we need to leverage groups. How do we put this all together? How do you know when to act versus when to plan?
That synthesis is all about dynamic balance. Think of the 90% rule of discipline as your stable foundation. That consistency is what allows you to absorb the small, cheap failures that RFA experiments will inevitably create.
So if your core operations are solid, you have the stability and the resources to afford some experimentation. But without that foundation, RFA just leads to a quick collapse.
They're an anti-perfectionism alliance. Both of them argue that trying to be 100% perfect is a waste of time. But there's a huge warning that comes with RFA. It's called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Ah, the classic bias. Explain why that's so dangerous for this mindset.
The fallacy is when you shoot a barn door full of holes, and then you walk up and draw a bullseye around the tightest cluster of shots to make it look like you're a great marksman.
You're highlighting your successes and ignoring all your failures.
Yes. If you're going to use RFA, you have to be brutally disciplined about tracking your data. You have to look at all the successes and all the failures impartially. If you only look at the wins, you're not learning, you're just confirming your own bias.
And that leads to overconfidence and eventually a massive failure you never saw coming.
Right. And the other critical boundary for RFA is that it only works when the cost of failure is predictable, quantifiable, and most importantly, reversible.
If you can't undo the damage, RFA is the wrong tool for the job.
It is absolutely the wrong tool. You wouldn't use it for building a bridge or performing surgery or setting major environmental policy. In those cases, the consequences are irreversible and potentially catastrophic. You need the slow, deliberate, ready, aim, fire approach.
So we need a way to decide which mode to use.
We can use a simple matrix based on 2 variables, reversibility and uncertainty.
Okay, let's walk through the 4 quadrants.
Quadrant 1, high uncertainty and high reversibility. So, you don't know the right answer, but a mistake is cheap and easy to fix. Think about A/B testing a headline on a website.
What's the strategy there?
Pure, ready, fire, aim. Speed is everything. The faster you test, the faster you learn, and the cost of being wrong is basically 0.
Okay, quadrant 2, low uncertainty and high reversibility. You know the right way to do things, and mistakes are still easy to fix. This is like a factory assembly line or your daily habits.
The strategy there is 90% rule execution. The goal is consistency and efficiency. You standardize the process and you aim for high compliance.
Got it. Now quadrant 3, high uncertainty and low reversibility. This is the danger zone. You don't know the answer, and a mistake could be devastating.
Here you need what's called extreme criteria RFA. You still act, but you limit your exposure severely. Think about making a small, speculative investment in a very volatile asset. You fire, but with a tiny, tiny bullet.
And the last one, quadrant 4, low uncertainty, and low reversibility. These are the high-stakes decisions where you know the risks and the cost of failure is absolute.
This is where you must use the traditional ready, aim, fire. This is for legal compliance, major surgery, $1 billion strategic investment. You have to be deliberate and plan exhaustively because the system cannot absorb a failure.
That matrix is a fantastic, practical way to tie this all together. True wisdom isn't knowing a bunch of facts. It's knowing which mode of action to apply to which situation.
And it's about overcoming our brain's natural desire for that neat, linear Gaussian world and learning to thrive in the messy, asymmetrical, Peruvian reality we actually live in.
Moving beyond that fantasy of linear effort for linear reward.
So to wrap this all up for you, our listener, stop waiting for that impossible 100% certainty. It's a trap. Instead, use the 90% rule to build that base of discipline in your core activities. That's your foundation.
Then use ready, fire, aim for fast, cheap learning in any area of your life where mistakes are reversible.
And finally, use the 60% collective wisdom theory to guide your big decisions. Diversify your investments and build that personal board of directors by seeking out multiple, independent perspectives.
It's all about building a system for yourself that's robust and adaptive, a system that can handle constant small errors instead of betting everything on one single perfect guess.
And this is getting more urgent. As technology and AI advance, we're seeing these super Pareto effects, where winner-take-all outcomes become even more extreme.
So the concentration of success at the very top gets even more intense.
And if AI can automate 90% of routine cognitive work, the question for you becomes, what are the critical 10% of skills that can't be replaced? What gives you that unique, nonlinear edge?
And that's the provocative thought we want to leave you with. In a world that's changing so fast, where should you be focusing your personal ready, fire, aim experiments right now to start building those irreplaceable skill stacks?
Go out there and start firing those small, manageable shots. Start learning.
Before we go, a quick reminder that all our discussions are objective, based on analyzing ideas, and they're meant to give you perspective for your own independent thinking.
And our vital disclaimer,
Yeah.
we are not licensed financial advisors.
Yeah.
Any examples we use are just for discussion. Please do your own research and consult with a professional before making financial decisions.
If you found this conversation helpful and it gave you a new framework for thinking about things, please consider subscribing to Sip and Talk. It really does help us keep these conversations going.
We really appreciate you joining us. And also, you should check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel. It's called Micky to Life. He's got some really fun memes, and his latest travel vlogs are great.
Definitely check that out. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.